Why, hello. Gender dysphoria is something I definitely felt as a child, but of course did not have the words to describe it. So I didn't really think that it was gender dysphoria and just kind of figured it was a general dysphoria. I had a lot of mental issues growing up. I mean, I was chronically ill in a way that directly affects my basal ganglia, so that's not really that surprising. And also trauma. There was a lot of that. I don't want to talk about the specifics at this very moment, so I'm going to be intentionally vague. However, I will say, for the sake of this video, one of the things that I'm actively trying to work towards healing are the symptoms of CPTSD, among many other things. But like I said, we're not talking about that right now. I was struggling a lot with this trauma and this mental illness and disabilities as a child, so I didn't really have the capacity to start thinking about gender until later. I was too preoccupied with trying to survive that I didn't recognize that there were signs of gender dysphoria, like a lot of signs. Like I was already feeling very awful about myself, and I just figured that one of the other things I was dealing with was the reason, and I didn't think there was a different reason for that, if you know what I mean. But then I hit 17 or 18, I'm not sure what age, it's all a blur, time isn't real. Late teens, I hit my late teens. It was around this time that I realized that I was trans, so I started to point all of my negative energy into that direction. Like I let myself feel all of my gender dysphoria all at once, very intensely, so that it consumed all the other negative things that I was feeling, so I was only feeling the one negative thing rather than all of them. Like between the trauma and the abuse, mental illness, chronic illness, all of that, it was just so complicated that I'd end up just paralyzed in my bed, not able to do anything. Like I'd just be sitting there shaking as my mind rattled and stabbed me from the inside. But I wasn't in therapy yet, so I had no idea how to process or untangle any of those feelings. So when I became aware of gender dysphoria and that I was dealing with it, you think I'd be distraught because, that's yet another hard thing that I'm going to have to live with. But no, because gender dysphoria to me felt a lot simpler than anything else. I understood it most of the time versus I didn't really understand the other things that I was dealing with. There's so much beeping outside. I'm just trying to film a video. I was able to separate my gender dysphoria, especially surrounding my body, from my other mental illnesses, or just like whatever else was plaguing me at that time. So all I had to focus on was how I felt about my body, how I felt about presentation, and how I felt about other people perceiving me in a certain way, rather than trying to focus on the millions of pills I had to take. That's an over-exaggeration. Clearly wasn't taking millions of pills, it's just a lot. What kind of construction is going on out there? This was an escape from the paralysis and instead became an ache that I could still function with. So instead of pushing the dysphoria down like I had been for so many years, I embraced it. Because to some degree it was helping me keep going. And it's weird kind of saying that because gender dysphoria is obviously a negative feeling and it isn't fun and it is hard. But in my case, it also kind of helped me because it distracted me from everything else that was worse. And I think that concept is what inspired ignoring the dysphoria. It was kind of like how in grade school, I was hoping so hard that I would get a crush on somebody because I knew it would be a great distraction, but arrow ace, that didn't work. I was just so occupied with gender dysphoria, or allowed myself to be occupied by gender dysphoria, so I didn't have to think about traumatic events that had happened to me. I didn't have to think about the abuse or the chronic pain or depression or anxiety or OCD and so on, you get what I mean. It was also nice because I had no idea how to solve any of the issues that I had been dealing with, but gender dysphoria seemed to have a more feasible solution. Like I was taking meds for my chronic illness and they were helping make some progress for a while, but then I hit adulthood and then the chronic illness became beyond saving, and just I couldn't really do anything for my disability. I just kind of had to let it happen. I also couldn't do anything about the bullying or the psychological abuse or other traumas, and I couldn't help the fact that my autism was making it difficult to interact with people. So I just felt powerless to a lot of the challenges that I was facing. I don't know why I'm giving that a thumbs up. I mentioned CPTSD earlier, and that became like a daily issue starting around like age 15 or 16. That's just when I remember it kind of spiraling out of control, and it kind of just got worse from there. But I didn't understand where the feelings were coming from, much less how to cope. but gender dysphoria felt like something I did have the power to handle. For a while, obviously, because as with most of the things that I deal with, my coping strategies only really work as band-aids. It's like I get fixated on something that's working, so I continue it for as long as I can, and then suddenly I will start resenting it because it becomes too draining. Similarly, for gender dysphoria, it would be like I would cut my hair shorter, but then it wouldn't be short enough in a couple of weeks, so I'd have to cut it again. I'd start binding, and it would work for a week, and then I would feel like it wasn't tight enough, so I'd either make it tighter or just try to make a new binder altogether. Sometimes the coping strategy was just denial. Other times it was wearing more masculine clothes. I just kept trying new things and then repeating the cycle. It didn't matter what I was doing, it just felt like I could remedy it on my own versus waiting for doctors to fix it or the universe to fix it. I was the one figuring it out, and it felt like the one thing that I was capable of solving. So sometimes I would let myself think that transitioning would fix all of my issues. But clearly, that's not how it works. I did start my transition, and that made my life so much better. Top surgery changed my life so significantly that sometimes I still have nightmares about what would have happened if I hadn't had the surgery. I feel so much more like myself now and so much happier with who I am, but that comfort doesn't heal trauma that was caused by something completely different. It's taken a lot of therapy and antidepressants and mental exercises and exposure to get to the point where I'm on a path to healing. I feel like I'm now at a point in this healing path where I can look back and actually recognize that I've improved. I still have bad days, but I have so many more good days than I ever thought that I would have. And to be clear, this isn't just because of transitioning. This is all the other work that I've done to heal myself in every way that I can think of. There's just a lot of self-acceptance that I've had to do, and I'm glad that I am a lot better off now for having started that process, feeling very grateful. Back when gender dysphoria was something I could only newly name, it felt separate from my other problems, so that's why it worked as a distraction. But nowadays, it's been blended so intricately with every aspect of my life that it no longer is separate, and it cannot be a coping strategy anymore. Or at least it's harder to use as a coping strategy. Now, it's much easier to just be angry at my body for being both trans and disabled, and that intersection can make things quite difficult. So I have to tentatively bounce between different problems and kind of add a few drops of solution that I can scrounge up at the time. Take the pills for the depression, go to therapy for the trauma, analyze my abandonment issues, practice self-compassion instead of self-harm, and so on. And for the gender dysphoria, things have definitely changed. I've taken steps in my transition that I didn't even think I'd be able to take way back when I was younger. I'm at a place in my life where I would be able to get access to gender-affirming care more easily, despite the fact that I'm further away from the places I would have to go to. And that's because I've grown a lot and I've learned how to meet my own needs. I do want to go on T at some point, but remember when I mentioned that intersection, my disabilities are a little bit unpredictable, so I have no idea what's going to happen if I start taking it. And I don't think I'm ready to deal with any potential side effects that the T might have on my immune system or on my nervous system. I'm doing my research, but there isn't anything conclusive that can give me like a confident answer yet. But also, I don't know if I'm ready to navigate and maintain a changing body when I barely can handle the one that I've got right now. There are a lot more things on this list of things I'm worried about, but that's for a whole other video. Being trans can just be very complex, and I don't really know how to describe a lot of the process because it intertwines with a lot of other things that have happened to me. And I know I'm not the only one who feels that way, but I think a lot of the time what we see in the media is simplified versions of what it means to be trans. No one is ever just one thing, so no one is ever just trans. There's so much more to trans people than just being trans. Nobody is defined by their gender. So I think it's interesting to take a step back and kind of look at the whole, and listening to individual stories I find quite fascinating. I'm starting to lose my train of thought, and I think I'm just rambling now, and oh, there's thunder. Okay, goodbye.